Just talk to me about the difference as well between long-term sickness and short-term sickness, because there's quite a difference in the way that it's treated, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. The principles are much the same in terms of how to deal with absence, but there may be more concern, more. You may need to tread a little bit more careful if someone's been off for quite a long time. Maybe 6 months or longer as a trigger point. So there you may be looking at the certainly the medical reasons or the reason why they're absent, and then you need to manage that process a bit more. So you would see more review periods as the period of absence carries on. But you would also want guidance, so you might need medical reports. So diagnosis and the prognosis of whether that person is likely to come back in the foreseeable future. And that's sometimes quite difficult for the medical professions to actually give that. But say, for example, they did say that there's no reasonable prospects of someone returning, then we're into a process of managing that, dealing with that and managing it and looking at whether there are any alternatives or any adjustments. If none, then looking at maybe how you process a termination.
And very sensitively in those circumstances as well, because it's not the same as a summary dismissal or something draconian, is it? But at the end of the day, you may still have to terminate that contract.
Yes, you can't hold a job indefinitely while someone's ill. At some point, you may have to come to a process of making a decision, but that's going to be guided by medical reports and, like I said, knowing whether they can come back or not. Any contingency plans, adjustments that may be reasonably considered, or alternative job function, whether that may resolve the situation. But if we're not being able to do that, then we're looking at processing termination sensitively.
I mean, all of that is quite a significant burden, particularly on a small business, isn't it? Because you've got somebody out of work, as you said earlier, it could have a significant impact on productivity. You may not know whether they're coming back to work or not. You certainly don't want to be on the receiving end of a claim about unreasonable behaviour in relation to an employee's sickness. And you have to pay the employee at least statutory sick pay, don't you, if they're off for particular periods of time. So that's quite a lot to handle, isn't it, when you may be quite small with not huge amounts of revenue coming in?
Yeah, that's true. So as a minimum, there is statutory sick pay or SSP. Very broad strokes. The first 3 days are called qualifying days where there's no payment. And then there is a weekly payment. The amount is £92 and 5 pence
a week.
A week. And it lasts for up to 28 weeks. There is some extensions when someone's come back and then goes off again and then you're paying, but that's probably a bit more complicated for this piece. But that's
got the guidance in there. I know it's in your guides as well.
Good. So that's the minimum level, and sometimes you might see businesses provide contractual company sick pay on top. So there could be 2 levels kind of payments during that period.
Absolutely. I mean, we were talking with one of our other experts the other day about what you do when somebody really key to your business suffers some kind of incapacitating illness or injury that takes them away from the business. And one of the pieces of advice they gave us was to look at insurance, because that may actually help you as a business to cover the cost of somebody being absent and bringing someone in at short notice, possibly having to pay them more than you would normally that employee to hold the fort, at least until you know what the position is with that employee. And it struck us as an incredibly good idea, actually, because it could really pinch not having someone there to help you grow and sell, and at the same time obviously having to do the respectful thing, which is pay them. And £92 a week is not very much,
no,
is
it's
it?
Not. But depending on what size of business, like you say, if your quite small, resources are small, then it's a significant outcome payment. But you're right. So some businesses may have like key man insurance.
That's the title they used. Key man insurance. Yes, thank you.
So it covers that key person coming out, but so payment going out to them, but then covering the cost for a locum or someone who's coming in like an agency worker or a senior consultant that comes in to kind of cover the bridge, if you like.
Yeah, it struck us as a really good idea because it's it does have an impact whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Great. Good to know that you support Keyman Insurance too. Now, I know we have a very detailed guide, obviously, on absence management, sickness on Ferrilio. One of the things it also touches on is other reasons for absence too, of course. Because sometimes it's not about sickness, is it? You could have emergencies, you might have compassionate leave. How do we deal with those as employers?
Yeah, so there's different levels, different reasons for absence. So like you say, there may be compassionate leave. That as an example, there isn't any statutory obligation to, but there may be a personal, kind of emotional, kind of immoral, yeah, that's probably the right word, a moral stance to give some time off. So you have different policies about who that might cover, how close that relationship might be, and then the level of paid leave. You can have dependency leave, which very quickly is where the employee has to attend an emergency that it concerns one of a dependent. Quite often that might be a child, but it may well be we've got extended families, so other members of the family who need emergency kind of assistance, excusing your absence from the business. The easiest one, it's a childcare breakdown, so you just physically can't come in because of that, is another example.
Yeah, and I think most employers would want to be able to support that too.
Yeah, and then you've got, there's other statutory absences, so paternity leave, there's maternity leave, shared parental leave, and these are all different statutory protected absences that come out of the when you're outside of the business.
Yeah, and again, you'd have separate policies for those in any event, wouldn't you? Because they are protected rights, and there's a lot of rules around what you as employers have to provide in those. Yeah,
so they're kind of they're called the family-friendly policies. So there's a host of those, and they're quite detailed.
They are
on the website. But yeah, so those are the family-friendly kind of absences and leave and pay provisions.